If there is no marriage on paper, does God still recognize this union? In maturity, perhaps this question has already kept you awake. You love, respect, care, pray, but deep in your heart there is fear. Fear that, at this stage of life, you are living something that God does not approve of. Today, the Bible is going to answer this, without condemning, without distorting. And stay with me until the end, because you will understand something that completely changes the way God sees love, commitment, and your own story, even after 60. Before we talk about documents, civil laws, or cultural traditions, we need to do something every mature Christian values: return to the biblical foundation. When the Bible speaks of a union between two people, it does not start with a notary's office. It starts with covenant. In Genesis 2, verse 24, it is written that a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This text does not describe a legal ceremony. It describes an act before God, based on commitment, responsibility, and surrender. Throughout the Bible, we see that God always treated marriage as something sacred, but not as something merely bureaucratic. What he observes is not just the external form, but the truth of what is being lived. This is important, especially for older Christians, because many of you lived in different times. Some were married in civil and religious ceremonies, others only in a religious one. Others lived in social contexts where the paperwork came later or never came. And yet, God was never confused about what he recognizes. In the Bible, a union is treated as serious when it has public commitment, fidelity, mutual responsibility, and reverence for God. This does not mean that legal marriage has no value. It does. It protects. It organizes life in society. But the central question here is not, is the paper important? The question is, what makes God recognize a union as true? And this answer does not start at the notary's office. It starts in the committed heart and in the life lived in truth. And let me ask you, with respect, have you ever wondered if God looks first at the paper or at the covenant that two people live before him? Write in the comments, God sees the truth. This helps other people follow this reflection without fear. And in the next section, we will proceed carefully, because here the main doubt arises. If there is commitment, fidelity, and reverence for God, but there is no legal marriage, what does the Bible really say about this? The Bible, while it does not reduce marriage to a piece of paper, also does not treat any cohabitation as a covenant. And this needs to be said clearly, without harshness, without judgment. In 1 Corinthians 6, verse 16, Paul asks a direct question: do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? And then he reminds us, for the two, he says, will become one flesh. Here, the Bible teaches us something important. Having a physical bond is not the same as having a spiritual covenant. Two people can share a home, a routine, and even intimacy, and still not live a union that God recognizes as a covenant. For many Christians over 60, this distinction weighs heavily, because no one wants, at this stage of life, to live something undefined. No one wants to give care, companionship, and fidelity without truth. The Bible shows that a covenant always involves clarity. It is not something hidden. It is not something provisional. It is not something that avoids responsibility. Jesus reinforces this when he says in Matthew 5, verse 37, "Let your yes be yes, and your no, no." This word speaks of integrity, of not living in a spiritual gray area. So, when two people say, "We are together," but without a clear commitment before God, family, and community, the Bible does not call this marriage, even if there is affection or care. This is not condemnation, it is guidance. Because God knows that relationships without a defined covenant generate insecurity, silent guilt, and spiritual conflict, especially in hearts that love God. Perhaps you are hearing this and thinking, so what does God expect from me now, at this stage of life? In the next few minutes, we will answer the question that naturally arises from this. If God values covenant so much, is legal marriage mandatory? Or are there situations where he recognizes the commitment without the paper? This is where much confusion begins, and where the Bible brings more balance than many people imagine. So let's move forward from the question that has become clear so far. If there is commitment, fidelity, and reverence for God, is legal marriage a biblical requirement, or a form of human organization that God permits and values? The Bible helps us answer this when we understand a simple principle. God establishes spiritual authority, but also guides us to respect the social order. In Romans 13, Paul writes that all authority is instituted by God. This includes the laws that organize life in society. Civil marriage arises precisely from this place, not as a biblical sacrament, but as legal protection, public responsibility, and clarity before the community. This means that the paper, by itself, does not create a spiritual covenant. But it also means that consciously ignoring the legal order without just cause does not reflect the character of obedience that the Bible values. And here, it is important to speak to those over 60. Many live in complex realities: pensions, inheritance, caring for adult children, and already established financial decisions. For some, civil marriage can bring real complications. The Bible does not ignore this. God is not unaware of reality, but the Word calls us to truth and coherence. If two people say they live as a couple before God, the question is not just, is there paper or not? The question is there a willingness to publicly assume this covenant within what is possible and honest? Jesus never taught his disciples to seek loopholes. He taught them to live in the light. Therefore, when civil marriage is avoided merely to maintain advantages, hide the relationship, or escape responsibility, this is not aligned with the spirit of the Bible, even if there is affection and faith. Perhaps this reflection is touching a sensitive point in your life. If this video is bringing you clarity now, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving messages like this, of light and clarity. In the next few moments, we will address something even deeper. Are there specific situations, especially in maturity, where God recognizes the covenant even without legal marriage? The answer requires discernment and much spiritual honesty. We now come to a question that many mature Christians carry in silence. Are there situations where, even without legal marriage, God recognizes a covenant? The Bible does not offer simplistic answers for complex lives, and this is a relief. Throughout Scripture, we see that God deals with real people in real contexts. Ruth, for example, assumed commitment, care, and fidelity even before any formal structure existed. What God observes there is not an immediate right, but a heart aligned, responsible, and willing to live in truth. This does not mean that God relativizes covenant. It means that he discerns the intention, the honesty, and the disposition of the heart. For many Christians over 60, reality involves pensions that guarantee survival, adult children who depend on stability, legal agreements difficult to reverse, or healthcare and inheritance matters. The Bible does not call this an excuse. It calls it context. In 1 Samuel 16 verse 7, we read that the Lord does not look at the things man looks at, he looks at the heart. This does not eliminate principles, but it reminds us that God is not a distant judge, waiting for a formal error to condemn. The central point is not the absence of the paper. It is the presence of a true covenant, commitment assumed, fidelity lived, clarity before God and the people involved. But here comes something important, said with love. When there is a possibility to live this covenant in a clear, public, and organized way, the Bible always points to the light, not to the shadow. God does not call his mature children to live in fear, guilt, or secrecy. He calls them to live in peace. Perhaps you are exactly in this place of discernment now. In the next few minutes, we will balance everything said so far, and answer an essential question: how to discern before God if I am living a legitimate covenant or just a well-intentioned cohabitation? After all we have seen so far, perhaps the most honest question is no longer, does God accept this union or not? But rather, before God, what am I really living? The Bible invites us to this kind of examination, not to generate guilt, but to generate peace. In 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5, Paul says, "Examine yourselves. This invitation is not heavy. It is liberating." A covenant recognized by God always carries some clear signs, and they are not sentimental. They are spiritual and practical. First, clarity. A union before God does not live on ambiguities. The people involved know what they are living. The family knows. The conscience is at peace before the Lord. Second, assumed responsibility. Not only emotional, but also spiritual and practical. Mutual care, joint decisions. Commitment that does not depend on the convenience of the moment. Third, willingness to live in the light. Even when there are real legal limitations, there is a sincere desire to align life with God's will, not to circumvent it. For mature Christians, this weighs even more, because no one wants, at this stage of life, to build something on doubt. No one wants to pray asking for peace while living in inner conflict. God does not demand perfection. He demands truth. And here, a silent question is worth asking. If today you presented your relationship to God in prayer, would you do it with rest or with fear? This answer often says more than any external rule. And this balance between truth and grace naturally leads us to one last essential question: what to do in practice when we realize we need to align our lives without haste, without guilt, but with faithfulness to God? So the final question is clear and honest: what to do when we realize our lives need alignment before God, without haste, without guilt, but with faithfulness. The Bible never guides decisions driven by fear. It always invites discernment, prayer, and conscious steps. In James 1, verse 5, it is written that if anyone lacks wisdom, they should ask God, who gives generously to all. This is especially precious for mature Christians who have already learned that hasty decisions usually generate more weight than peace. The first step is not to change everything overnight. It is to bring the situation into the light before God, with total honesty, without justifying, without condemning oneself. The second step is to seek balanced spiritual counsel, not extreme voices, not hurtful opinions, but leaders and brothers and sisters who know the Word and respect your story. The third step is to ask with sincerity, is there a real willingness to live this relationship as a covenant before God? Because when there is, God always opens paths, even if they are gradual. For some, alignment may mean formalizing the union in the possible way. For others, it may mean reevaluating the cohabitation, the boundaries, and the clarity of the commitment. The Bible does not force molds. It forms consciences. What God does not desire is for His children to live with chronic guilt, constant doubt, or spiritual fear, especially after a whole life seeking to please Him. And remember, God does not call you to confusion. He calls you to peace, truth, and rest, even at this stage of life. After everything we discussed today, one truth needs to remain in your heart. God is not a God of confusion. He is a God of direction. Perhaps you have arrived here with doubts, apprehensions, or even a silent weight on your conscience. But the Word reminds us that when we trust in the Lord and seek His guidance, He makes our paths straight. If this message brought clarity to you, leave a comment. This creates fellowship and helps other people realize they are not alone on this journey. Share the video and subscribe to our channel, Ageless Souls, so we can continue walking together. Remember, walking in the light does not mean perfection. It means sincerity before God. We'll see you in the next video.